Welcome everybody. Today we're going to be doing a special masterclass hosted by Injini. I'm Gigi. I'm going to be joined by Ishe and Greg, and we're going to be discussing AI and what it means as an investor and also a founder. We're going to be trying to go beyond the buzzwords, think about what does robustness look like when you're building a model? How do you make sure that it's contextually relevant? And as an investor, how are you doing due diligence that supports your mandate and really asking those critical questions as you look at the technology that's in Africa? We've tried to root it in our context, so it's going to be super relevant. Hopefully it's going to move people beyond just the concept of this is a AI to actually understanding what the difference is between automation, data, compute. After listening to it, you've got practical insight that you can use when you're looking at due diligence or you are thinking about building a new product. I'll start off with you, Greg. Can you introduce yourself?
My name's Greg. I'm the COO for Melio AI. We work with enterprises to help them deploy and productionalize their AI solutions. So we help guide their teams through that process. And the goal is really to create tangible value. Most of the AI solutions that you see in the world today don't get to production. They fail midway through the process. So we come in to help companies to productionalize that so it actually gets used. And it's not just a slide. We also have a product side of our business. We're building an AI marketplace, and it's specifically for SMEs to help them get more from their AI without having to invest in large data science teams, lots of engineering, lots of infrastructure. We do that all for them, and they subscribe to our AI products and services on our AI marketplace.
So you mentioned that you help SMEs actually bring in AI into their workforce and you make it more efficient, that you build products around AI. But what do you guys define as AI?
I think AI is a very broad term. The industry as a whole has probably overused the term. When we talk about AI, the first thing that we think about is what problem are we trying to solve? How are we going to solve that? And can we use an AI-driven process to do that? And the way that I like to describe AI, if you compare it to software engineering generally, in software, you would have some data and you'd have lots of rules. Like, if this happens, I must do this. And you'll get an outcome as a result of that. So every rule has to be coded into your software. AI is the opposite. You take the data and you take the outputs that you've seen historically and you use that to build a system that defines what the rules will be. So now you don't have to go and programmatically specify every single rule in order to solve a problem. The AI has been trained to be able to understand, based on this data, these are the rules that should be applied. And that makes building AI solutions a lot more effective. They can generalize to more problems, and they're typically more effective.
I see. So I'm trying to build a cake. I've got all these ingredients. Historically, you'd be feeding each ingredient in and you'd be doing that whole process to get it to the outcome. Yeah. So now you're saying, look at the cake and work backwards to figure out how did we build this and then apply it into different domains. So I'm trying to simplify this.
I think if you watch your mom cook a cake and you watch what she does, you'll get an idea, but you're probably not going to win the first time you do it. You're going to have to see it happening many times, and there's very different cakes that you can bake. Very different. And what the AI does is it takes the learnings of all of those experiences, and it understands generally this is how you would bake a cake. These are the things that would go into it. Depending on your ingredients, this is the kind of cake you would get.
So it's pattern recognition, and that's why the data sets are so important.
So the amount of data is important, the spread and the variety of the data to encompass what baking a cake truly means is what makes an AI model effective.
This is a great segue because Ishe, you guys at Vambo AI do African languages and thinking about how to get a model to be reliable. There's probably a data constraint. Can you tell us a bit more about Vambo AI?
Basically, you nailed it right there. So Vambo AI, we are focused on African language AI. So everything within the AI domain we want those same things to happen for African languages. So you can speak to an AI with your voice. You can type. You can ask questions like that. But because of the issue of data scarcity, African languages encompass, it's approximately 0.2% of all major data sets. So there's been a huge gap. So our journey is kind of to bridge that gap.
Let's dig in deeper here. We've done a due diligence and we're thinking this is a great company to invest in. The business makes sense. The team is the right one. What are the first couple of things in a product that you guys look at to verify if this AI claim is actually robust enough?
So I think the most important thing would be to first look for its equivalent, its non-AI equivalent, and weigh out if this is better, if it's different, how and why. So, because you've got, these days we've got search engines, we've got AI search engines. The difference there being, of course, if I'm going to go into a search engine, I'm going to look for something, I'm going to open that article, I'm going to go find that specific piece of information, as opposed to an AI search engine where I'm just going to ask the question, get the answer back. So there's that kind of equivalence where we're trying to find out, is this actually materially better for the user? Or, what's the difference there?
I like that, because you can benchmark to see that, is this necessary and does this actually solve the problem?
It's about the way that you're solving a problem. So how is AI positioned to help you to uniquely and more effectively solve a problem than you could do otherwise? If you can solve the problem with a simple method, even if it's not even a software program, then that's probably the way you should solve it. But now for an investor, is that sufficient to create a moat? And do you have some kind of competitive advantage over that? And usually what we see now is AI is in everything because everyone sees it as a competitive advantage. But you have to tread cautiously to determine whether it is actually unlocking that value that differentiates from everything else. And usually it's the way you approach the problem, and it's the type of data that you're using to unlock those opportunities that no one else has access to.
So is it the model or the data that's the moat here?
So it's actually very hard to say because it's been very controversial as to, okay, so is it more important for you to have a unique AI model? Is it about the user experience? I can't conclusively say. But I think the most important thing, if you're looking at it from a business perspective as an investor or something, is for you to at least know what's going on where. So does this team build AI models? Are they using AI models based on someone else's platform? What kind of relationships there?
To build onto Ishi is the how they've actually evaluated their model. So they say this is what they've got in place. It's a great solution. It solves all the world's problems. But how have they gone in and evaluated how it does that? How do they compare that to an established baseline, either something that's norm in the industry or a traditional way of solving that problem? And is it possible for a company like Melio or Vambo AI to be able to go and follow that evaluation and be able to reproduce it ourselves? If we can't do that, that for me is immediately a red flag. Then I've lost a lot of trust in their ability to execute. And as an investor, I would be more concerned. As a founder, make sure you cover some of those bases.
So it's about reliability, right? So you can replicate it and think about people still finding the same result and still making sure that your claims are valid. And then you can benchmark and see what other systems actually exist and how do we compare to that. How do we make sure in the realm of data is king, we want to get these outputs, we want to be more efficient, that we're still thinking about, is this ethically correct? And how do we navigate the ethical part of AI?
So I think we should really think about AI ethics as, in this context, as an ongoing process, because you can have a team that might start on an ethical path, But things can, be one, very hard to pick up on in the early days. Two, the direction might change altogether. The first question is, how was that data even sourced? Was it sourced ethically first? Can we prove that it was sourced ethically? There's so many layers to that one.
Like investors or people need to understand that AI is not a perfect solution. It's a good solution. It'll never be perfect. You can never get a model that's 100% accurate. But what's good enough for your business problem? If it's providing medical diagnoses and medical advice, your definition of what's good enough is a lot higher than something that has less of an impact on an individual. Like, are we making carrot cake or lemon meringue today? It's okay if it gets it mostly right for most people. And that's why the evaluation and the constant monitoring and testing in real world scenarios is critical for the ethical use of the AI model and the continued use of it. Because the models do degrade and data changes. What's happened today can be very different tomorrow. I mean, just the impact of COVID has probably created a massive shift in what data represents globally. And there's no sure cure for that or treatment, but that you have to build into your processes, like Ishe said.
As an investor, I've got 7 years with this company. I've seen it in year 3. They've got a beautiful model. But in year 5, the model is eroded. We don't know what is happening. Are there ways to actually help your technical team think about that? We want this in place. We want to see this in place to make sure that the model is still robust, it makes sense in the long run, and we don't run into this problem of just erosion of it.
That is all about how you build, manage, and monitor your solutions once they're put into production. And to monitor a solution is not easy. A lot of companies struggle with this. It's about monitoring, or first establishing a baseline. This is what our data represents, and our model's trained on it, and our model works well. Now we need to monitor how that data might change over time. Your population representation, if it's personal, gender, racial biases, all of that can be introduced over time that you didn't account for because you're training a model with a sample set. There's a lot more data out there. You can't train it on everything. So that you want to look at, and then based on that, how would it change the outcome of your model? And is your model, as a result of that, the same? Is it better or is it worse? And you can monitor that with metrics that are built. There's a technical way to implement that into your process. And as those metrics change and they reach a threshold, then you need to go and have a look at it and retrain it, or you need to understand where the discrepancies are. So it's not just build it and deploy it and forget about it.
That's actually really good, because I think then when you are thinking of investing in an AI technology, part of the things in your due diligence process is, do they have a way of actually maintaining the quality? Have they thought about baseline assessments? Have they thought about what if the data is reconfigured? And I think when you're testing out that model, it's important to ask those questions to the team to actually see that in 5 years, will this actually still be as good as you claim you are? And if there isn't, I think part of your job as an investor is then to buffer that in, but it is a good consideration to actually have at the back of your mind is like, how do you keep monitoring? How do you keep evaluating? And how do you make sure that the outcomes are strong enough? And actually, this brings me very, very well to the next point I wanted to discuss. When we dig deeper, I think we've buzzed around with saying there's data, there's the actual machine learning, then we're thinking in Africa specifically, there's connectivity and being able to actually put this at scale and have people use it. There's load shedding and energy consumption. I heard that AI is bad for the earth. I was thinking of going vegan, so I'm not sure about this tech build, and that's a joke. But how are we thinking, and maybe we can discuss and unpack some layers together, right? When we think data, when we think compute, when we think connectivity, when we think energy. Let's start with data, because we've spoken about this. Any quick tips to think about how do you continuously find the right data? And you talked about data not being there. How do you continuously, as a product person or somebody trying to help a team, continue to source good quality data? And then how are you thinking about data bias and thinking about, yes, it's good quality, but we're human as well. We've got some biases that can bleed into that, and how do you take care of that?
So in terms of finding new data, there is at a point where you kind of cut off there, and you just literally have to create it yourself. But the most important thing has been the efficiency of the usage of that data. So instead of you can think about having 1 million lines of translation between any two languages. It's Zulu to English, for example. So you have that translation data available to you, and you can train a model. You can do different parameters 100 times if you want. But things change immediately as soon as you can identify areas for improvement. So, for example, you might find out that it's from 5 different sources, and source A has terrible data. By removing that source, and maybe that was 20% of your whole data set, that last 800,000 could actually produce a better model than your whole thing. So so sometimes it's not even about getting more data, it's about using the data you have more effectively.
Got a lot of questions, but I'm going to pass it over to Greg. How are you guys thinking about helping companies get the right data, think about it strategically and how to apply it, when to remove certain things? How would you advise a company to look at that?
Yeah, I think we've got maybe a broader sort of use case set than Vambo around the African languages. We work with large financial, retail, healthcare type companies. And in almost all of the projects, we spend maybe 80% of our time just working on the data itself, getting it ready, checking the quality, checking the biases and all of that, making sure it's representative. Before we even start the modeling process. The modeling is actually the easy part, to build the AI model. But to get the right data in is where most of the effort comes in. And most companies, pretty much all companies, especially the traditional companies, their data is terrible. That includes all the banks, all the insurers,
I was gonna say
all the telcos that you work.
Wow, their system is all automated. I mean, you're clicking one tab, it should already be pulling and getting insights around, she's most likely going to do that.
I mean, it may be in some places, but most of that data is now going into 10 different legacy systems, and it's hard to connect it all together. Mm-hmm. And the way that data scientists use data is very different to how corporate and telco systems process and store the data. So there's a lot of work to transform that data into a way where it's ready for the modeling process to begin. And that's significant effort depending on the use case that you're in.
Silly question here, but I'm imagining you guys are sitting there looking at the data, which is probably too rudimentary. So do you guys have models that actually clean up the data? Or is it still like having to manually go in, look at the quality, give me a mental image of how it's happening?
Yeah, I think the human side is definitely the best evaluator. We help companies build data quality processes in place, but that often doesn't solve the problem. It helps to identify where the source of the problem is. And often the source is where it was captured in the first place. Like the point of sale at your Pick and Pay teller. At that point, it could be the way the system's designed, it captures the data the wrong way. And already at that point, it's wrong. And now you've got to go through that whole process of understanding as it travels through to get to your model, where are the points where it could go wrong, and how do you put controls in place to prevent that. And that's not a data scientist's job. It's not even a data engineer's job. It's the business. It's the business owner's role. It's whoever owns that business area, they need to make sure the quality of their data is good, because they are going to get nothing great out of that from an AI team's perspective. They'll throw their toys. I mean, we've been in many meetings where the business owners they're basically telling the data science teams that they don't know what they're doing because they're not getting the results they're expecting to see. AI should just do it. But AI can't just do it. It's not plug and play. And a lot of it comes down to decisions that were made quite a long time ago that impacts the whole process.
And so this is actually really good because I'm thinking as an investor, this startup has a claim to say, we will make this whole process easier. But they are also engaging with legacy systems. So part of the question that I think you then asking your due diligence is, how do you integrate into the other systems? How do you look at that data? How then do you clean it up before the model even kicks in and operates? Because there's a question around what you've just brought up is the quality of it, the systems it travels to, being able to pick up where the issues are. Oh, this is big. There's a huge market for just data cleaning at this point.
So we're actually working on a project at the moment where we're taking some of the latest innovations from, OpenAI and Anthropic and the rest of the big tech companies. And how do we use that contextual understanding that you would get when you talk to GPT? It understands, it can reason. How do we apply that to looking at data from a quality point of view? How can we look at, this is your data set, this is the things that we're looking for, these are the issues that might come up, have a look at it, give us some information or insights into what could be done better. And how do we work with an AI like agent or chatbot that can do that, take the outputs of that and build it into automated data quality processes. So now your AI works with your data quality processes. And going back to my first point, without having to code every single rule, it's now actually understanding it and building the rules as it goes based on the information it's seeing. So for me, OpenAI and all these LLMs that have come out are opening more and more opportunities for innovation. And small companies, startups can build products and solutions focused specifically on this issue, data quality, in very innovative ways. And that's, for me, very exciting. It also, I think the biggest benefit we have in Africa is we're leveling the playing field quite a bit with the rest of the globe in terms of how we can apply innovation and our ideas to solve problems. And that's really great. Even though it's coming from these big tech companies abroad, we're able to use those solutions in very unique and innovative ways.
I am fascinated, but also I think every time I see a pitch deck where somebody says, we've just plugged in an OpenAI, I'm going to be very cautious now. I'm like, actually, you don't know how this data is operating. From the little knowledge that I have, I think it's to tease in. Is like, how do you even ring fence? Like, if you're just plugging in an API solution, it's really not. Well, you may be solving a use case, which is great, but I think there's so much technicality that's getting lost in all of that because you're just basically adding a tidbit to hopefully automate the situation, but I don't think you're building the intelligence factor around it.
It's just a tool.
It's just
how are you using the tool?
I feel smarter already, guys. Let's move on to now talking about computer power, right? These large language models, everybody's like, oh, we need 7 million computers, we're running out of energy. How are we as Africans thinking about this? And how is it affecting your guys' product decisions when you're thinking about this product is good to roll out, and before you even go there, explain the compute process, like going from model building, data capturing, why is it so high in energy use?
It's not just high in energy use, it's very expensive too.
Why?
My whole budget is blown for the month.
Why? Why?
So basically, you can think about AI models as almost like a software program, not exactly the same thing. And we've had all kinds of AI models for the longest time, right? But the ones that we call AI now, which are the modern ones, they are absolutely huge. They are tremendous in size, and for some of them, we're talking. I'm trying to find a way to quantify it for the technical users, but basically,
we'll try to put an image here of an AI model just running.
Oh, it's huge, yeah. But like basically, if we took someone's laptop at home, it would be that maybe times 1,000 to even run it. Actually, I think that's a fair estimate, yeah. So, they're really big.
I have to pause you here, and you have to just school me. and let's use ChatGPT to bring this to life. I'm there, I'm typing, tell me a poem that Shakespeare wrote. Why is it so, to me it seems simple. It just says Shakespeare wrote Macbeth or what. What happens in the background that then requires all of that?
Because in the process of you getting that response, when you ask about Shakespeare, you're asking one specific question. But this is a model that is intended to know everything.
Oh, so is it filing through?
There's layers and layers and layers. So basically, it's going through this giant database. Yeah.
Anything possibly related to
Anything.
Shakespeare.
Wow.
Yeah. So you can think about it like this.
I see it.
Okay. Maybe I live in a small one-bedroom flat somewhere over there, but you don't know where my flat is. It's just somewhere in the wider Joburg area. So you have to go through all of these places everywhere until you find the right one. And literally, if you were just driving, imagine how much fuel you'd use.
But that's like magic, because to the user, this feels instant. It's like, and it just gives you, and you're like, oh no, and you tweak again. Wow, that is sorry, I'm just...
Science is magic.
This is magic. This is so cool. But I see the image. That is why it takes so much power.
That's why it needs so much.
But not all... I mean, these LLMs definitely, but not every solution requires that. You can have very focused solutions that do a very specific, help solve a very specific problem. You don't need a lot of you probably don't need more than a laptop then to do that. What is important then is now you've built it, how many people are going to use it, and how often at the same time. And if you've got 100,000 people accessing your little model, you need to make that available to them, and there's additional compute required to host that. So there's lots of different perspectives depending, again, on the type of problem you're solving. And I think what's nice about using cloud providers and on-demand compute is that you can right size. So you can use just enough to do what you need to do and not have to go and purchase very expensive machinery, GPUs from NVIDIA, and spend hundreds of thousands on hardware that you might use for a day, a month. With cloud compute like AWS, you can use it for just that hour you need it in the month, and then you can turn it off.
So as an investor, you're then saying, because I'm assuming, not a lot of companies, I'm assuming, are going to take on another ChatGPT. It seems too large. It's just got so much going on at this point. Maybe Anthropic and those other guys coming off the claws and new models. But I'm assuming on the African continent, you're going to find something more specialized, something more with more precision. So you're not looking through the whole of South Africa. You're just looking at maybe Rosebank to see where contextually relevant of what I'm looking at. So would you then advise that companies like that in the build and deployment, this is a deployment part, where you're thinking, go to a service provider, get this amount of compute, right? You pay for that, and then you say, we use that. But how do you ring fence costs? I'm assuming as a user, I just pay a subscription. Is there a way to then help a company think about the cost structure? Because now I'm thinking all those silly mistakes that you use. Maybe you didn't use the right word and you forgot to put a comma and other meanings misconstrued. Is there a way to then help builders or investors think about supporting their companies to lower costs as they continue to run the models?
It is right sized to the solution you're building, and those costs from all the cloud providers is very transparent. You're almost paying per second, per minute. You know exactly what you're using as it happens. And I think it's a red flag for me if a company is buying hardware to develop an AI solution, unless there's a specific moat or competitive advantage that it gives. For me, that's a major red flag, because
big red flag.
Yeah, if you're buying hardware, you don't have scale. What happens if the business expands significantly or contracts significantly? You're still left with this hardware. With cloud compute, you can scale that with the demands of the business. So you deploy that little model to 100,000 users, but next month it's 1 million. Now you have to go through a whole procurement process to go and acquire more hardware to host that. Or you can just auto-scale your services on something like AWS that will manage that for you. often in an automated way with some controls in place to manage cost. And now your service is still at the level that your customers expect, and you don't have GPT downtime, which we all hate.
Yes, because then I don't know what I'm doing with my life. Okay, so now I've got this mental image, guys, of all these laptops running. They're overheating. There's an energy. How do we cool? Like when we're thinking, especially on the continent, right? How are we thinking about, and I'm sure this is not now a startup constraint, but like an opportunity set. How do we think about actually like the energy use, the plugging in to power the system, the cooling it down, making sure that it's still running and not overheating and not breaking? And I'm trying to ask this question necessarily not as an investor, but just somebody who cares about the earth and thinking about AI adoption being brilliant because it can do so much of this work, but also being conscious of our energy climate and thinking about as a region, how we navigate that. So do you guys have any thoughts, and not just as for investors, but just as people in the space, and how do we do this practically on the continent? Or is it just not a consideration until everything's on fire and we're like, we'll hose it down then, we'll figure it out?
I'd say actually, honestly, I would actually just throw it to all the startups there. Not only is this for your costs, it's for the environment as well. It's just like Greg said, appropriate model for appropriate size model, because you can literally go and get a 1 billion, 70 billion parameter model, which is super big, to do this one small task. It's going to cost you so much. You're burning trees unnecessarily. But meanwhile, you have a very focused and specific problem. So you should actually have sort of a well-defined objective. This is what we're doing. If we're doing optical character recognition, for example, so we're doing optical character recognition, we're doing it in this language, these are the characters, and we can have the smallest model possible. And that way, you can think about it even, in the same way as transport. You can have, certain celebrities who like to fly that private jet for 10 minutes. You could have used your car. It wasn't necessary to bring this huge thing into it. You could have just, saved on the carbon emissions.
I don't have the stats, but I'm pretty sure I won't be too far off. But I would say 80 to 90% of all the environmental costs are probably as a result of the big technology companies and their artificial general intelligence, their AGI race to be the best. I think, we're in the AI age now, and it's not the race to the moon, it's the race to artificial general intelligence, so AI that can think and act on its own. And most of the costs come with training those models, because those are these massive models that need to do everything. They're trained on a lot of information, and they run on these massive data centers with hundreds of thousands of computers training those models. And that's where a lot of the energy costs will be. And I'd like to say, I'll just leave it to the tech companies to manage, but I think all the AI solutions that we build as a company or startup, we should take some accountability for it. And I think the easiest way to start is to report on the usage that the processing power and compute usage that you're using to build these models, what you're using, and be transparent with your investors around how that affects the business. That'll be the first. So take some accountability, even if it's small, and everyone should do it. Maybe it should be a requirement in our sustainability reporting. I know you've got some history there, so I think that should be another dimension that must be looked at. And then definitely startups, small businesses in Africa, South Africa, that's where the innovation will come from. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to explore.
I was so excited in the beginning of this, like, oh, it can do so much. Then I'm like, oh no, it can't do so much. So a part of me, it's bittersweet, guys. Oh, I'm worried. Okay, so we've spoken a lot about the whole universe of AI, trying to understand it, some issues, some concerns. Let's go into EdTech. I'm curious. You guys are both in the space, but I want you to put different hats on, and we'll just do some predictions here. Rapid fire. We're going to play a couple of games. We're going to think about if you guys had some bold predictions looking at what has happened in the edtech space. There's a lot of personalized learning that's coming up. We've thought about how do we help teachers grade and make work work more efficient. There's thoughts around how do we make curriculum more contextualized and redesign it and do blended learning. But looking at just the whole globe, taking back your guys' learning experience, thinking about the fact that you've worked with making it more relevant to the user with their own language. What are some bold predictions that you have about edtech in the future? Could be wrong, could be right, we're just playing. But if I'm an investor in the AI space, thinking of education technology, where would you prime my eye to be looking at? And what do you think is exciting with you and what you're seeing in the space?
My concern is that, especially in South Africa, we're far behind the global curve in terms of technology in education. And my concern is that it almost doesn't matter what kind of technology solution you produce, it's not going to be that effective unless you can get the users, the students, the teachers to embrace the technology in their way of working. So that maybe to kick off is my biggest concern. The opportunity is there. You know, we've built POCs with tertiary institutions around automated grading and helping do career planning and course planning, and I think it will help. My wife's a teacher, so she uses it a lot to structure content, and it helps for her from a productivity point of view. She has challenges around students' abuse of AI, which is another ethical and social challenge. But how do we make it something that the education sector, private and public, can embrace? And what's the easiest way to that path? Because once you've got the adoption, then the solutions will come fast and furious.
I think in terms of the efficacy of the actual AI models, we've come a long way. And there's actually now some, around the world, there's some evidence of AI actually improving learning experiences. I think just similar to what Greg mentioned, my mom's a teacher, by the way. I think the big opportunity is in an implementation that doesn't require 6 weeks of a new training course. Like, we're just doing what we already do, but it's just a little bit more efficiently, but better. So for example, like how I'm pretty sure I haven't been to school in a while, but I'm pretty sure everyone's still pen and paper and write. Instead of trying to run around with a new initiative, let's get all the kids these nice new tablets. Let's put chargers next to all the desks. That complicates things. What would an AI? What would an interface look like if we could just still have them write on pen and paper, and maybe it's just it's just a picture and it's just scanned into a system. Maybe even a robot's just ticking and crossing things out. So we don't want to change people's lives.
Most children have their way of learning. They've got all different learning styles, and it's hard for a teacher, especially in South Africa, when you've got a class in a public school of 40 plus people, 40, 50 students. How do you give them the learning approach and style that's going to make them, learn the content in the best way possible for their unique way of learning? And maybe if they can get past some of the technology barriers, where, AI is a technology solution at the end of the day, how do we remove some of that? Then how do we personalize that learning and development in a way that will be most effective for each unique person?
And we've seen some companies that are trying to do this in the Injini portfolio. Like, we've got your Vambos who have worked with us before, sneak peek there. But we've also got companies like Mindjoy who are coming in with technology. And what they're trying to do is build the infrastructure layer so that people can put the contents layer there. And then it can be adaptive in different situations. But we've also got MindSpark, who's trying to do personalized learning and think about if you're a grade ahead, how do you still move on, yet still being class relevant. So I think for me, what's exciting and the opportunity is around the kid itself in terms of the personalized learning, the contextual stuff. But I also think you guys are pointing to something that's maybe not looked at as like intensely enough, is around ecosystem-wise, like infrastructure-wise, like as a school, like the user experience with adoption, thinking about the infrastructure that supports this, thinking about just those things that make product to deployment that much more like seamless and like has a higher usage point.
Government support.
And government support. I don't want to get into that, but in government support, we'll leave it at that. Because that's a conversation for another day. Although there are some cool initiatives that the government is thinking about. Let's not bash on them.
Like toilets.
You know, maybe an AI automated one. But
so that's the challenge. We got to get the basics right first.
We do. And it's like a chicken and egg, right? Who comes first? But let's move back to the broader ecosystem. We've got just a couple of minutes, but I am curious about what are you guys, if I now am not forcing you to invest in edtech and I'm giving you $1 million, what are you putting 80% of it in, like as your bold predictions that for Africa, this is going to make sense and this is going to scale?
Look at it in two ways. One is that's that moat. So invest in companies that are building high quality, localized solutions that are specific to like industries, has a vertical focus on an industry. So high quality data like African languages applied to this specific industry creates a moat. That's the one dimension. The other one, some examples will be like localized financial records, medical data specific to Africa, language. Is it corpuses? Corpuses, okay. I wasn't sure if that was
Corpa,
okay. I was wondering about that. Like local compliance and regulations, like things that are unique to like a local market. And then the second part is to invest in solutions. We're driving the SME focus, so invest in solutions that can help SMEs become more productive and solve bigger problems within our environment, our local environment. So we try to build the tools to help enable those SMEs. But we also want the SMEs to then go and solve bigger problems using these tools, because they are just tools at the end of the day to solve those problems.
I would actually just say the industries that I'd look at would definitely be I don't even know how to put this, the industries that are basically at the core of our economies. So things that we just really can't live without. As much as I'd love to see AI in entertainment, maybe we're not at that point yet. But if we're talking edtech, no matter what happens, come storm, thunder, COVID, in education, someone's always investing. Private schools are investing, government's always investing. It's huge. Agriculture, basics there. Most countries in Africa have huge agriculture. And I'd also say in fintech as well, because fintech, African fintech being one of those areas that gets a lot of investment already, just because of the unique way people handle finances in Africa.
Guys, to close this off, firstly, very, very, very informative. But I also maybe want to discuss one last thing. Does it actually matter that, and maybe this isn't a relevant question, but you know how Africa is very mobile first rather than desktop? Does that interfere with how we create and how we deploy models, or is it just the back end and it all works the same? Is there anything that if I'm an investor thinking my user's probably going to be on their cell phones, this should be designed differently, or is it all the same and you've got, what is it called? There's a language model response or something like that just makes it easy to move around. Does it actually matter?
I don't know what that's called, but I will answer your
Answer
question.
the question. I'm trying to put fancy words here to sound smart.
Okay. So that does matter. in terms of your interface directly, designed in a certain way, that's going to be a big one. But even in the way you think of how to build it, so you can kind of tell, and this is going to tie into internet connection as well. Even though it's not like 100% certain, someone on a phone is less likely to have a stable connection. So using your mobile network, and sometimes network goes down, whereas your Wi-Fi is a bit more reliable. You're using your phone on the go, network's down. So that actually does kind of affect how you'd conceptualize the API, how you build your own APIs, and it can be in small or big things. Like for example, there's a lot of talk to AI live features at the moment, and those are nice, but that's the assumption there is that the connection's already stable. I would go the opposite and think, let's do a voice note kind of thing, and if it doesn't go through, you can auto retry. So, just think about things from the other direction.
I have a project example. So we worked with a startup in health tech, and they provide sexual and reproductive health advice to young females. And they needed a solution that was very low touch for very underprivileged populations that need this advice, but they don't have the technology to access it. So no smartphones, anything like that. But most people in South Africa and Africa have access to a mobile device. So we built an AI solution that uses USSD. So they would send a message to say, I need some advice. And that would then go routed through our solution to phone them back. And they would actually have a voice communication in real time with an AI agent. And that AI agent is connected, and all of the internet connectivity is now on the back end because they're talking to them via a phone connection, providing them with the guidance around their specific problems. So it was quite a nice hybrid model of how it could still work, even in difficult areas where there's low connectivity or low adoption of smart technology like smartphones.
It's a great way to end, as I'm going to ask you this closing parting shot. But I think such a great thing as well as an investor to just keep in mind is that local context and thinking about innovating in a way that grows your customer acquisition, that keeps your costs lower, but that still solves the problem. And not being afraid, I think, to flip the script, right? If we are mobile first, how do we build with that in mind? And maybe even thinking about in your due diligence, having those conversations in terms of, is this locally specific and does it actually make sense for the user that they're targeting? So really, I think good insights at the end there. Closing off, guys, thank you so much for chatting with me today. Any parting words if you're thinking of the investor audience, the founder audience that you'd like to add about AI investing in Africa, in education? I know I've learned a lot. I feel like at this point somebody can hire me as an AI expert. But until then, I'd love to hear your closing thoughts.
I think it's important to note that we're still at the very early stages. We are at the what were they called? We've got 33 tens right now. So I'd like to see people thinking towards what's this whole world going to look like when we have the equivalent of the iPhone or the Galaxy 25 if you're an Android fan. We're very, very early at this stage in the game. So much more to come.
I think little nuggets. Definitely don't reinvent the wheel when a startup's building a solution to a problem. Focus on the problem itself, not the model. I think that often gets overlooked. So it's not just about AI in my product, it's what problem are we actually really solving? And then how do we solve it in a way we don't have to reinvent the wheel to validate that there's market fit? Once that's in place, then you can build out a more specific or bespoke solution if you need to. But then look at how you can partner with others. There are a lot of very talented companies in South Africa that a lot of startups can partner with. they can partner to help them build components or for advice. And it will be great for VCs to build that capability into their like advisory capacity of the ventures that they fund. Hopefully being Vambo AI and Melio AI. Thanks very much.
And Injini AI.
We don't know about that one just yet.